Hi there, and welcome back to another edition of Scale Up Radio, the podcast inspired by the entrepreneurial scale up system and designed to make navigating our scale up journeys that little bit easier by learning from each other's experiences. I'm Granger Forson, and on this episode of the show, I'm joined by Fiona McKinnon of the Moment Company. Today, we'll explore the transformative power of well-being in the workplace, the journey from burnout to founding a company centered on wellness, and the insights on building a culture that drives success. To ensure you don't miss any inspirational future episodes, do subscribe to Scale Up Radio wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. Also, you can nominate a guest for Scale Up Radio if you know anyone with an interesting scale-up journey. You can find out how in the show notes. So let's now dive into the inspiring journey of well-being, culture, and growth by becoming curious about me with Fiona McKinnon. Well, hello, Fiona McKinnon. Welcome to Scale Up Radio. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, very nice to be here. As you say, my name is Fiona McKinnon. I've always found it difficult to introduce myself very clearly and concisely because I do quite a lot of different things, but I am the co-founder of a performance and well-being coaching business called Moment Company. I am the COO of a streaming TV advertising business in the US called Keynes Digital. And I also run my own podcast called May the Life Force Be With You. And it might sound that there's little connection between all of those things, but there is a reason to my madness and my passion areas and my work that may unfold as we start to unravel my kind of journey to where I am today.
Wow, three amazing things. Yes, let's discover the connection and the journey between them. So which one should we start with? Let's start. Which one did you start first? Shall we start there?
So I guess what might be interesting is my background, which is 24 years in online advertising and ad tech. And I was very lucky in my career to both work and live all around the world. So I spent time in Australia, I lived in California, I lived in Toronto, back and forth in London in between. And again, fortunate that a lot of the businesses I worked for were startups. And I was either employee number one through the door or certainly, first 20 in the door. That taught me an awful lot about business, good, bad, and ugly. And I loved it. And I feel very grateful to have been in an industry right at the very beginning. There was no Facebook, Google was only just launching really when I started in the industry. So I'm very conscious and aware that my experience was different to anybody starting in that industry now. So I had this brilliant opportunity to really kind of make it up as I was going along, which I've subsequently realized everybody else was doing as well. It was called new media in those days because none of us knew what we were doing. And there was something very exciting about that. But to fast forward those 15 odd years of working for startups, I basically was 24/7. It seemed terribly glamorous because I was constantly on a plane, flying to places to train teams, to launch products. But what I realized in that journey was that I had zero awareness of self-care. I had zero awareness of boundaries. And I was becoming frustratingly more angry, anxious, and unable to communicate in the way that I knew I needed to because I didn't know how to say no.
Yeah.
And in 2014, my body said it for me, and I suffered from severe physical burnout, which in hindsight, I realized had been going on for some time. It's just I didn't recognize the signs from my mind. It took my body giving out for me to stop.
Yeah.
And so in 2014, I decided that I couldn't work full time again. And I set up my own consultancy business, which led me then to work for a consortium of publishers, The Guardian, CNN, Reuters, the FT. It was great. It was on my terms. But then I started working for CNN and got seduced back into the full-time work environment again, which was fantastic and a brilliant opportunity to be working with fantastic global brands. But I could feel the burnout returning. So in 2019, I quit again. And it was at that time that I met my co-founder of Moment Company. And that came at the perfect time for me, where I had been starting my wellness journey myself. I started meditation. I'm 5 years sober next week because the work hard, party hard is a thing in advertising. And I burned every candle at every end for many years. My idea of balance was a yoga class followed by vodka martini. And running a marathon in between, so I realized that something had to give. And meditation really changed a lot for me. And I became more curious about what had happened to me, about workplace boundaries. We're on an audio, but some of the books behind you on your bookshelf, Brené Brown, was impactful for me. And I started just a curiosity journey. And as I say, that coincided with meeting my co-founder of Moment Company. And that is where everything really accelerated, where I retrained as an NLP and generative change consultant. I studied mindfulness, I studied meditation, I studied Reiki, and really got to know my own boundaries and realized that a lot of what happens in the workplace is preventative. It's preventable even.
Yes. Yeah.
And I wanted to be able to share my journey and say, if this burnt out, frazzled, crazy person that flies around the world drinking vodka martinis can change, then you can too. Because I was the most skeptical person at the beginning of my journey. And I wanted to be able to give back, to help people find other ways of doing things, how better communication in the workplace can make such a huge difference, not just to the individuals, but to the bottom line as well, because that's what business owners want to hear.
Yeah.
But that old cliche of putting your own oxygen mask on first is so true. We have to be able to be more aware of our communication style, more aware of our well-being, and therefore how it impacts our performance. And that is where I now find myself running a performance and well-being organization.
Okay.
So I'm going to take a pause there because I realize I've been talking for quite some time.
No, that's amazing.
But
Well,
that's where I am today.
no, that's fantastic. What I love in that statement that you've just given us of your journey is that becoming curious about me, not just curious, which all of us should be. I'm curious around marketing, I'm curious around business growth, but actually being curious about yourself. I think that's quite a real eye opener. And probably one of the part of the journey I've been on in my life as well, and I've become curious about me. And I think that's a really powerful statement out of everything you've done, and you got to that point in time.
But you know what, though? It can be very scary for people
Mm,
because, particularly with being sober at the same time, is that you feel things more and you have to own up to some of the part you've played in toxic workplace environments, some of the decisions that you've made, some of the environments or businesses that perhaps didn't follow your ethics. Then you have to take a step back and reflect on that too. So it can be uncomfortable. And that's why I think that I went down the coaching route to be able to create a framework to help people through that process to understand that it's not you that's the bad person. It's just a set of circumstances and environments that maybe decisions weren't optimal because we're all operating in a suboptimal environment. And it starts with ourselves first. And that takes bravery
yeah.
and vulnerability to be able to do that. And that's scary.
And sometimes you need somebody to tell you that. I needed somebody to actually say to me, stop doing this and start doing this
Yeah.
instead. And I went, oh my God, I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
That started
Mm-hmm.
me down that journey. But as you say, but you accept things. We accept that environment around us rather than challenging it. We think it's the norm. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
described your journey of, traveling around the world. You described what was going on. You just accepted it rather than actually thinking there is something different. And that's really interesting of how that change takes place in lots of people to do that. So you got to this point in 2019. You've now set up the business. So take us through then. the moment company, okay? Because you've talked
Yeah.
about 3 that you're doing. So next question, what is the moment company? What do you do to delight your customers? What ultimately helps to pay, the money that you want out to be what success means to you?
So I joined Moment Company at a very interesting time in that it was February 2020, and we all know what happened shortly after that.
We do.
We do. And for me, it also coincided with me moving back to Scotland to care for my father, who was terminally ill. So I was launching a brand new business. And actually, at that time, I'd inherited Moment Pebble, which was the company that I joined, which was a physical product which helps guide people through a breathing sequence, which is tactile, smooth to touch. It's based on a NLP theory around anchoring and attachment theory, where we all have our favorite mug, our favorite pillow, whatever it is that gives us that moment of comfort, a bit like a child who has to have the blanket, otherwise the world is caving in. And so the Moment Pebble was created to give people moments of calm throughout the busy day. So when I came into the business, the product was still in prototype, and we were due to go on Dragon's Den. And I spent many hours perfecting the 2-minute pitch, being absolutely petrified that I was going to be the person that was going to fluff it all up and end up, sweating through their eyeballs and being a meme forevermore. But of course, thanks to COVID, that season was cancelled. So we were fundraising, and that was going to be our route to be able to get the product across the line, because it was just in prototype. And I had gone from being in the digital world to now finding myself managing real world product. And that was a big jump. And you soon realize that 1 millimeter out on a box is actually the end of the world because nothing fits together. And we had a few backwards and forwards there. So I learned a lot. I jumped straight into fundraising, which I would say to anybody looking to do that, think long, think hard, because it is a challenge. It's difficult. In hindsight, I'm not sure I would have gone down that route. There's a separate pressure that comes even with friends and family around for bringing in outside investment,
Yeah.
which I'm not sure I would have personally gone down that route, but I'd inherited that when I first joined. Anyway, I'm fast forwarding a little bit because over the course of building a product of which you can purchase now, you can buy your own Moment Pebble. It's a beautiful thing. And it does, we've got some raving fans who it really has helped them with their stress and anxiety. But my co-founder, Alex Strang, and I soon realized that really the benefit of what we were giving people was not the pebble, it's the moment. And it's the ability to find tools and techniques to really take a pause, understand that you have a choice in the decisions that you make. You have agency over your own decision making, and really about mindset management is really what moments are all about. And again, we explored what felt right to us, and we both come from a consulting, coaching, and services background. So applying everything that we knew about the benefits of mindfulness, about mindset management, about the toxic environments that we had experienced and burnout we'd experienced, we now offer that as a performance and well-being program to companies similar to the ones that we worked in. So we tend to focus on scale ups, and we focus around that up to kind of 50 to 100, sort of lowest maybe 20 size of company, where it might be founder led, but they all of a sudden find they have a leadership team that perhaps needs support to help with the scale up and to help accelerate their skills. And we are very integrated within a business. We don't just come in and do coaching and leave. We don't just do a one-off workshop and leave. We work with you 12 months. We become part of your vocabulary. We help you bring to life and execute the insights as a third party that we uncover, because we believe that it's not possible to have sustainable high performance if you don't have a good foundation of well-being. So balancing those two things is what really creates impactful change within organizations.
And
It's not just about one-off yoga classes. That does not.
absolutely. So, I'm a small business owner. I'm sitting here thinking, oh, about well-being, yeah, blah blah blah, yeah, but I do appreciate it because I've gone on my own journey. But how do you bring that to a company, to a business owner, to really understand? Because ultimately, it's their vision, maybe it's their objective in for the revenue that they want to achieve. That they're driven around some sort of. Sometimes they've got different things that drive them, but revenue is a massive one that drives every business for growth, etc. How do you sort of go about then helping them understand to start the journey? Yeah, I appreciate what you do as the journey, but how would you go about, making that real understanding happen?
It's really, working directly with them to understand what some of their challenges might be. So it might be a new leadership team that just needs a bit more support, or perhaps they've got aggressive growth plans for the coming year, but don't really know where they should invest or if they've got the right team behind it to execute it. Perhaps they've got communication issues between different departments that internally they're finding hard to unlock and to get things moving more smoothly. At the end of the day, communication tends
Mm,
to be the challenge. Um, and often, what we do to start is that we do a survey for the organizations, because employees are more likely to be honest with someone that isn't a direct line manager and with a third party. And that's the real benefit that we can bring. We're a safe space for people to be able to talk freely. We are a confidential space. We'll only escalate anything that we uncover in a one-to-one coaching session if permission is granted to do so, unless there is, ethical concerns there. But it's somewhere that as a third party, you can get so much more insight. And then we play that insight back to the leaders. So we take them through surveys, we take them through insights that we have got, but we don't just leave them with the data. We produce a set of recommendations that suit their business. And that's the real difference between an app or an employee assistance program or, as I say, yoga classes. They're all badge exercises. We really go in and we help make cultural change.
ah, making cultural change. Yes, that's probably one of the key things that we need, and often that will start with the business owner, won't it? The person realizing the change that they need to make that happen. So you started 2020 just as the good old COVID hit us and everything else. Where are you today? Just you and your business partner, or do you have other team members? What's happening for the business size?
Yeah, so my business partner has actually just emigrated to New Zealand. So that
Brilliant.
is interesting. We have clients based in Europe and also in the US. So we currently manage that between us, but we also have a really great network of professionals and facilitators who are experts in their areas. So it's important to us, when we run workshops, if it's an imposter syndrome, we get the best person to present that workshop. We have 7 facilitators that we work with to help us with scale. And then we have some admin support behind the scenes as well, so that Alex and I can do what we do best, and that's the coaching hours and that one-to-one impact sessions with leadership teams. We're off to Vegas next week to run a leadership offsite, and so we make sure that we've got the time for the FaceTime piece, and we support the business through kind of admin support. But our goal is not to have a big team in the traditional sense. The well-being and coaching industry is huge and it's only getting bigger. And we believe there is a space for different voices and for different types of organizations who are looking for different types of things from teams. And so our goal will always be to work with partners rather than to hire directly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great business model. Yeah, I totally understand that one, and it's a way of scaling without having to grow people with skill sets. You bring in those skill sets that you need, and you can achieve then what you want to do. So that's the
Absolutely.
Moment Company. You then talked about
Keynes Digital.
Keynes Digital. So when did that come about, and what was the next step?
So Keynes founder is an ex-colleague of mine from my US days, although we're both Brits. And in 2018, he said he wanted to set up his own business. Would I like to be on his board and be his kind of just pick your brains person? Because, you know, I have been in the advertising industry for a long time. So I was very honored to do that. But that business has taken off, and it has taken off hugely. Phenomenal growth. It was nominated in Inc. 5000 fastest growing company last year. And through that, I realized that I could support in ways that can really help that growth accelerate from my startup in the industry experience. So I proposed to him 2 years ago that I could take more of an active role other than my board position. And it's been fantastic. And I'll be honest, one of the first things I identified was a need for a proper leadership team, a way to bring in kind of coaching. That I do not coach the leadership team. That's too much of a crossover of conflicts. So my business partner does. But we've been able to bring our program to Keynes, which is where there's a nice crossover in my day-to-day brain cells.
Mm,
So, you know, we can see the impact directly from one to the other of what looking after a team really means, and also you know, how impactful it is even around hiring. So people knowing that there's support, there's coaching, there's a progressive, fast-growing company that, let's face it, gives a shit about their well-being is a
yeah.
huge draw for people in differentiating themselves between, you know, a large growing industry in the US. So that's where my kind of brain crosses over. But I'm hugely excited for Keynes. I help them with their marketing, with their strategy, with leadership support, and obviously coaching as well. So they get the benefit of my 20 odd years in the industry and my connections. And I fulfill my passion of making sure we create an advertising company that is not all the things that I didn't enjoy about being
Yeah.
in businesses in the ad tech industry. So you know, kind of living what I preach on that side of things as well, which is a lovely thing, and I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I see how you're now sort of closing that circle, and you're bringing back your new knowledge and new skill back into the industry that you worked in, and helping
Yeah,
a business achieve that, but keeping that wellness and that structure is in place based on everything that you know today. And
exactly.
you've got a proving ground, haven't you? And you've already talked about it. It is working. You know, the business is the fastest growing 5,000. Well, fantastic for doing that. I mean, just to sort of pick on that a little bit, what few key things then do you think is really helping the team to accelerate with the growth that they're doing compared to where you were in your past? Yeah, which was the 24/7 play hard, party hard. What's the difference, do you think? What key things in the business have you implemented, do you think, that are really helping that drive to growth?
So Dan Larkman, who's the founder of Keynes Digital, right from day one. So this is pre-pandemic. This is pre anything when we were literally talking about setting this up. Something that's always been really important to him is that the business creates a better life for the people that work there, but also for customers. And that's the lens that we look at everything through. So are the products that we're creating making life easier for our clients? Are we doing things quicker, more efficient, which means they're not having to work as long hours? Are we optimizing their role because we communicate better and we understand their needs more? It's very high touch what we do, with that lens in mind. And so that also then translates obviously internally. So,
Mhm.
you know, we're respectful of hours, we're respectful of communication. I introduce async meetings so that people's diaries aren't full. We introduce that to clients as well. So instead of saying, can I take 30 minutes or an hour out of your day? and I send you a 2-minute Loom video where I get all my points across. You've got it as reference. If it's something technical, for example, then you can go back and revisit it. Or, I've just cut half an hour diary time out of your busy week. So just little things like that can really help. We support, we have budget to support people doing something for themselves every month. So they can choose whatever it is that well-being means to them, and they're given budget to do that. We also, have regular get-togethers because it's a fully remote team. So we ensure that there's still face-to-face time. And also really through the workshops, bring to life some of the terminology. So radical candor has been a big part of the organization since day one as well. So ensuring that there's not those sidebar conversations, that we say that what we need to say, and that is heard and not misinterpreted. There's kind of a follow-up to the communication style, and really a kind of quite linear structure, so that everyone has a chance to kind of put ideas forward, that's really been acknowledged as well. So they're just some of the ways that the value of the business is brought to life.
And what I love about that is you've just given a whole host of sort of things and ways that a lot of people go, why would I waste time on that? Why would I waste money on that? But actually, the demonstration is the business is growing and scaling and highly successful, and so actually, it really, really works.
The worst thing you can do is not, correct miscommunication or
Yeah,
let things go unsaid. If someone's I've been in a toxic bullying environment, and 20 years ago, when I went to my boss at the time and I said, this is how I feel, and he chose to believe the other person, came out a year later that he backed the wrong horse and asked me to come back. And I said, no, because the trust is gone.
yeah,
So, being able to hold space for people to have genuine conversations about how they feel about things and have that heard, actioned, and appreciated is huge. And, companies need to understand that their biggest asset is their team.
yeah,
Communication is the biggest way that you can help support them. Listening, as well as talking, listening is very important.
yeah,
And a lot of managers and leaders today, in fact, the stat is that 82% of leaders in the UK today have had no formal training. Yet we throw them into the lion's den and then say, oh, I wonder where we got it wrong and why people are leaving. And when people leave, it hits the bottom line. But even worse, I believe, is when people stay and are disengaged,
yeah,
because then you don't get the best from them either, but the toxicity remains. So they then start to breed that into other team members. And so you need to stop that as soon as possible. And that comes from good leadership, that comes from a framework of communication. Um, and so it does matter. And it also makes it a happier place to work, because you don't want to work somewhere that makes you miserable. Let's face
yes.
it.
And we talk about with our clients, we talk about the five behaviors model of Lencioni, and it starts with trust. And what you've just been talking about
Mhm.
is to have that trust level, you've got to have great communication, you've got to have that candor, you've got to
It's
have
that psychological safety.
absolutely, you've got to build all of that. We use those terminologies, but actually that's what it's about. It's about how do you go about doing that. And what you've demonstrated actually is if you go about doing that deliberately right from the beginning, you build an environment, then the next comes the ability to manage that conflict. But actually, conflict is not conflict because people are fighting. Conflict is about conflict of ideas. What's the best idea? Which is the best way of going? What's the best solution here that we could go and experiment and try? And that's the real conflict that comes out. And that's what makes businesses grow and accelerate faster than anybody else, because it's not one person's ideas, it's everybody, but that only comes from that first level of trust. So yes, that's psychological safety.
Well, I believe as well what you're describing there, is conflict comes from a lack of framework and a lack of process. So when you just throw everybody in to the pit together, then you're just asking for a big fight, as opposed to it being really clear whose position is what in the decision making, clarity of boundaries, clarity of roles and responsibilities, decision making. So, who makes the decision? How quickly is it made? What's the briefing process behind those? So, we introduce briefing templates so that projects can be heard and actioned quicker and with more clarity. So, we're using kind of agile sprint technology and bringing that framework into performance mindset.
Wow. I've built agile activities in businesses before. You've just sparked a whole nother thought in my head. But anyway, I'm conscious about time. We're just having some
Yes,
amazing thoughts here for building a business. Let's just add in that third element that you talked about right back at the beginning around your podcast. So tell us
my
about
podcast.
um what was it? May life
May the life force be
be
with
with
you.
you. There we go.
So,
Yes.
okay, so here's, I guess, where I get a little bit, I hate the word woo woo. So I'm going to say spiritual on my journey. And that is that as I've got to understand more about what happened to me in my business experience, what I have learned about myself on that journey and being able to reflect back on others, some of the simplest tips and tricks in the world are how to breathe, how to open up your mind to be curious, right back to the first comment about curiosity. And so I have launched a podcast that we say it's where self-help meets spirituality, meets entertainment. And we get curious about everything from breath work to, I had a conversation yesterday about mushrooms, to I share my ayahuasca journey, through to sex therapists, yoga, tantra teachers, and astrologists, permaculturists, money manifestors, and everybody in between. And I learn so much every day. I feel like I get a little top up upgrade of how to just expand your thinking. And I think that's probably one of the best pieces of advice I have for anybody launching their own business is you got to keep an open mind
Mhm.
because you never know what the journey is going to throw out ahead of you. And if you are so dead set on one thing, one way, then I would suggest that you're going to come a cropper quite quickly. So being curious, getting to know different ways to think about things, um, and realizing that not everything's black and white has been huge in my own personal journey. I don't sweat the big or little things as much anymore. Um, and that started off with curiosity.
Mm. And that phrase that I learned a number of years ago, is life happening to you or is it life happening for you? And if you accept the second one, you actually have that open mindset to actually explore and think and become curious. I love that word already today.
Yeah.
So yeah, very much so. So within your podcast, is it around education? Is it around learning, or is it about you exploring? What's the sort of purpose of the podcast?
So it's with myself and my co-host Karila. She is a channel guide, so she can speak about spirit guides and a language that I'm not familiar. I'm kind of the person there that's the lay person conduit to the mainstream world, and our goal is that we can bring people along that just want to understand more about something that they've not heard of. So we have one episode a week, which is us talking about perhaps something that we've come across personally or a therapy that we've tried or something that's happened in the world that we're interested in. And then one other episode a week as a guest that we've invited along. And we start by asking, what does life force mean to you?
Mm,
And the answer is very different every time. Interestingly, truth that you mentioned and
yeah.
trust, comes up a lot. Breath, life, and yeah, we've had endurance athletes talk about how to fuel your body in running, and that's, their version of life force. We've had a birth doula, we've had a death doula. So it's really something to pique everyone's interest, I hope.
Mm. And how does that then feed back into your other
Mm.
businesses? I'm intrigued.
Do you know what? I actually find that I get some great insight from experts that I use in my coaching. So sometimes in my coaching style, I might start with a meditation to get people thinking out of their logical brain, but just stepping into their feelings. 80% of our body's communication is not from the mind, it's from the body. So getting in tune with how we feel, somatic practices, breath work, all of these things are great ways to help people unlock challenges they have in their workplace environment. So I'll always gauge someone's level of receptivity to that, but I often use some of the techniques that I hear on the podcast and in my coaching, and obviously personally use it as well, which makes me more grounded. I'm more aware when I'm having conversations on the business environment as well. And I'll tell you something, people are very curious around psychedelics, mushrooms, ayahuasca as well. So I found it makes me massively more interesting in parties these days when I talk about that. I feel less crazy and more interesting.
Brilliant. That opening pitch and Dragon's Den could have been very different
Yeah,
if you knew what you knew
exactly.
today. So one sort of just final question before we start the sort of wrapping up. So you've given lots of sort of real thought about starting up businesses around the people side and doing that. Okay, let's anchor that. What advice would you give? If I was a new startup and maybe going a year, I'm going for scale. I've looking for funding, etc., etc. And along come I meet Fiona. What key bits of advice would you give me so I can give out to our audience to really think about that creates an environment that like Keynes Digital would then replicate in my environment, my world?
I mean, I find it hard to give one piece of advice because my one piece is that we're all very different, and the
Mhm.
reasons why we're starting up a business can be very different. If you want to build a unicorn and you could risk is your middle name and you just want to raise investment, that's very different to somebody that has a lifestyle business. But at the end of the day, being clear on your goals and why you're doing what you're doing and what you're aligned with is really important. If you've got a co-founder, that's even more important that you check in regularly to make sure that what you are building is what you want to represent in your life. In terms of, it's very easy to just think let's build growth, but when you're working 24/7 and you've forgotten who you are and what you're doing it for, that to me isn't success.
Yeah.
So being true to what you want out of life is really important to that, which is where I think a coach or someone to help bring that out and keep you accountable for that is really important. Again, when we're founders, entrepreneurs, it's easy to say, well, this is what I want. Nobody can really help me. I know what I want. Definitely, where you can find a coach, find a mentor, find someone that can help you unlock what's really important to you.
Brilliant. Wow, fantastic. So let's think about 5 years time. We'll meet up for a coffee. We'll have a physical one. Hopefully my voice will be a bit better from this cold. We've gone and you've recovered from your jet lag, but you sound so much better than I do. So thank you very much for that. We're going to look back in the last 5 years and what's happened both for you professionally and personally for the 5 years to have been really successful.
God only knows. And I say that genuinely with excitement
Mm.
because if I knew what the next 5 years entailed, wouldn't that be boring? If I'd known 5 years ago I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I would have told you were crazy. So I would like to, in 5 years' time, be surprised.
Be surprised. That's probably one of the most exciting answers I've ever had to that question. Be surprised. Brilliant.
Hopefully in a
Well,
good way.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, Fiona, thank you so much for this conversation. It has been really interesting in the way that it's panned out and the conversation. So we started with, you do three things, but actually the journey of where that came from, that the burning out, living life to the max 24/7 in the marketing world, and you were the early marketeers in the digital world and helping to learn and to grow that. But that moment of burnout, that and something has to change. Your body's saying to you, and you became curious, and I love that. Became curious about yourself, curious about life, and that's led you down, this amazing journey where you've now met your co-partner, and you created the moment pebble, or you're part of that journey of that creation, which then took you on to the next part, which is now building that structure in businesses so they're successful. And then working with a friend that said, come and help me, come and give me your experience, but saying, okay, I'm going to bring my experience to it, not just my digital marketing experience, but let's build a company that's really successful, worthwhile, because we're going to focus on the people, building that real trust and bond through understanding what goes wrong in communication, building that trust and bond between everybody of how we work and put things together, making your customers' life easier. I love that statement. It's one of my favorite statements in life. My background is in lean and continuous improvement, and I totally understand that. Making our lives easier. We use a phrase called "fix what bugs you," to do that. And just how that's then evolved into your podcast, and how that enriches your life, and you bring that back into everything you do. And that wonderful question at the end about 5 years, and you just want to be surprised where you'll be in the next 5 years. Thank you for that. That's a sterling answer. I love that so much. So if I may, we'll finish with a quick fire round.
Okay.
So a few questions just to take us to the end of this amazing conversation. So if you'd go back to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
Quit the booze earlier, stop burning the candle at both ends, and just go for it.
Brilliant. Any books that you recommend?
My number one recommended book is Into the Magic Shop by Dr. James Doty. It's a really simple read about rags to riches to rags to mindfulness, and mindfulness is the key to it. And it's my most gifted book.
Fantastic. Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's on my reading list now. Podcasts. Any podcasts you listen to you'd recommend?
Obviously, may the life force be with you.
Absolutely.
But as part of my ayahuasca journey last year, I gave up the news. I don't watch the news. I don't really, I deleted Twitter. I deleted socials. But I do get my fix through The Rest is Politics. The Rest is Entertainment and Diary of a CEO. I'm also a bit of a Formula One fan, so I also listen to that as well. So yeah, they're my kind of most repeated listens.
Onto your mobile phone, any apps that make a difference for you?
So I got into something called High Rocks last year, which is a crazy CrossFit type competition. And so I wear a Whoop, which tells me how I'm sleeping, how I'm training, and guides me around my optimal levels. So that is my most looked at app.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, something that tracks you and gives you feedback. Yeah. I track my sleep, interestingly. So yeah. My favorite question of all, who's had the most influence on you as a business leader?
Um, Probably some of my old bosses, good and bad. It's quite interesting. I'm not going to name names, but some present themselves at the moment as real kind of leadership gurus, and it's interesting to me. They must have changed since I worked with them. So I think over just observing close hand bosses that sometimes the bad experiences are the ones that guide you the most without realizing. So that is where I will leave it.
Um, for finding clients that want to work with you, what's your most successful sort of lead gen or tactic that you do?
Good old LinkedIn. So I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So that's always a good place to find me. Our website, momentcompany.co. But usually a message through LinkedIn is the best way to get in contact.
And I'm going to throw in an extra question here.
Mhm.
So the journey you've been on, I've been on a similar journey. Is it a function of age, or are other younger generation coming through and people saying they're lazy, or are they actually just learning from us and realizing that they want a better lifestyle before they get burnt out? What do you think's happening to the younger generation?
So I turned 50 in a few weeks' time, and I feel like I wish I'd known what I knew now 20 years ago. And I do think that there is more self-awareness. I think there is more awareness around boundaries in the younger generation. Um, I also think that some instances that can be pushed too far. And I do think we're going to see over the next couple of years a little bit of a reset in terms of expectation around output, around getting back into offices, about the way that we connect again in the real world. And I think that will shift some generational gaps, perhaps, because I feel for the younger guys, they're not getting to hang out in offices anymore. It's where you build really important social human connection.
Absolutely.
It's where you learn. Some of my most interesting connections at work are not people that I work with directly. In this day and age, I would never have the chance to speak to those people because they're not in my direct department. So I do think it is a product of age. That you start to have a bit more self-awareness around what you bring to the table, and you can kind of take it on the chin a little bit more. But I also think that younger generation have more access to resources that we perhaps didn't, and they talk in a different way about their feelings, their emotions, their boundaries, their expectations than we were ever able to. So
Yes.
it just needs to be balanced up with a little bit of productivity shove. That would be my only kind of generational,
Yeah.
you oldies think that, but that would be there's a balance between the two. I think one and the other are too far apart right now. What do you think?
Well,
Am I allowed to ask?
yeah, I actually agree with you totally on that front. Though I passionately believe in, it's one of the reasons I set up my own business, is if you build the environment, then actually the productivity will come, rather than forcing productivity and thinking it'll just be there because I tell people. So building the environment, fixing, my lean background, fixing what bugs you, focusing on how you get things better, learning every day. Every day is a learning day, to bring that learning opportunity to everybody. And if we build that within our businesses, then actually you'll have that, and the young generation just will be part of that, and they'll crave that, because actually if you're given that time to learn and to grow and to experiment and to make your life be easier, then actually, yes, you'll achieve more for doing things. So I think it's not a generational thing. I think we've always done it wrong, but what happens now, because of the knowledge that it exists in there, because of COVID, the younger generation are actually pushing back and saying, I don't want to be like my parents for doing that. But actually, I think our parents and us, as we grew up, we maybe got it wrong because we didn't understand that, what can really achieve, and that's the journey's taken me to this point. So
Yeah.
there you go. Wow, somebody's asked me a question on my podcast. Thank you, Fiona. That's great. So finally, very last question of all, how can people get hold of you?
Through LinkedIn, that's the best way, or through our website, momentcompany.co. But definitely, whether it's about connected TV, about being a guest on the podcast, or Moment Company, then LinkedIn is the best way to get hold of me.
Fantastic. Fiona, what an amazing conversation. It's gone a beautiful way in terms of doing that. And we've finished off by how do we help the next generation achieve. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.